Do you think you've heard everything about Elvis's last album? What if I told you that his final record was stitched together between his home and live shows, with takes recorded right in his living room, at his piano, and songs captured on stage just days before his farewell? Get ready to step inside the jungle room, feel the piano vibrate, and witness the last creative breath of a legend. This is the true end of the journey, and you'll want to hear every note. Do you think you know the real Elvis Presley? The artist, the idol, the man of packed stages and screaming fans. But what few people know is that in the last months of 1976, the King of Rock was about to live one of the most intimate and mysterious chapters of his entire career. And this chapter didn't happen under spotlights or surrounded by producers and journalists. It happened inside his own home, in a room that would become legendary, the Jungle Room at Graceland. That's where the final studio recordings of Elvis Presley were born. At that time, Elvis was already a living myth, but he was also a tired man, physically and emotionally. The tours were long, his body was starting to feel the weight of the routine, and his enthusiasm for entering a traditional studio seemed to have faded. RCA, his record label, needed new songs, and producer Felton Jarvis knew the King's moods well. He knew that forcing another Nashville session wouldn't work. That's when an unusual idea came up. If Elvis wouldn't go to the studio would go to Elvis. The Jungle Room was one of the most eccentric spaces in Graceland. The atmosphere felt like a tropical refuge. Walls covered in green carpet, carved wooden furniture, decorative waterfalls, and warm yellow lights. It was a place where Elvis used to relax, play the piano, and entertain friends. But in February 1976, it would be turned into an improvised studio. RCA technicians brought in cables, recorders, and microphones, setting up a complete recording setup. Suddenly, the room where Elvis used to hide from the world became the stage for his final sessions. The first recording days, February 2nd and 4th, revealed an introspective Elvis, but with a spark still in his eyes. On the second, he recorded She Thinks I Still Care, a song that would be saved for the next album. And 2 days later came Moody Blue, the track that would give its name to his final record. His voice in those sessions was full of emotion. He alternated between moments of total surrender and long pauses, taking deep breaths, as if he were trying to pour his heart into every line. These sessions were different from anything he had ever done. There was no pressure from big Nashville studios, nor the frantic rhythm of label-driven sessions. There was silence, comfort, and a certain melancholy in the air. The sound coming from the Jungle Room was raw, intimate, and full of imperfections. But it was precisely those imperfections that gave authenticity to the moment. Felton Jarvis knew he was capturing more than just musical takes. He was recording the last spark of a giant artist. And you? Do you believe the Jungle Room recordings reveal the most human and truthful Elvis of all time? Leave your opinion in the comments. I want to know what you feel when you hear these tracks. The material from those sessions would be partially archived and revisited months later. Even tired, Elvis still wanted to keep recording. In October 1976, the equipment was set up again in the Jungle Room. On the 29th and 31st, he returned to the microphone for what would become, though no one realized it, his final studio farewell. On the 29th, he recorded Way Down, Pledging My Love, and It's Easy For You. And on the 31st, he laid down what would become the last studio vocal of his life, He'll Have to Go. These recordings sound different. You can feel the weight of the years, but also an almost spiritual inner strength. His voice is deeper, more restrained, yet still immense. Elvis's tone carries a mix of fatigue and greatness, as if he were singing to himself, aware that this might be his final record. Every syllable seems to come from deep within, and listeners can sense there's something final about these songs. During these sessions, the atmosphere was one of respect and concentration. The band, made up of musicians who had played with him for years, knew they were witnessing something historic. No one spoke loudly, no one dared to interrupt when Elvis began to sing. The sound of the reel spinning, the reverberation from the carpeted walls, and the echo of his voice filling the room made it feel like the house itself was breathing with the king. These recordings weren't meant to be a final act. Elvis still planned to continue. But looking back, it's impossible not to feel that the Jungle Room served as a kind of final confession. There, surrounded by memories, photos, extravagant furniture, and silence, he reconnected with music once again. The result was an honest portrait. No glamour, no polished studios, no crowd, just the man and his voice. Those sessions would become the heart of the album Moody Blue, released in 1977. More than a record, it became a symbol of farewell. Every track recorded in that room carries a piece of Elvis Presley's soul, the artist who changed music forever, and who, even in his hardest moments, kept doing what he did best, singing from the heart. The sound of the Jungle Room lives on, as if each note still echoes through the walls of Graceland to this day. It's where the myth becomes human and the man becomes the king once again. After the Jungle Room sessions, Elvis Presley seemed ready to continue. His longtime producer, Felton Jarvis, believed the king still had creative energy and planned new studio sessions for early 1977. The idea was simple: gather new songs in Nashville and complete the material for the album that would be released that same year. But when the time came, the studio was empty. Elvis didn't show up. No one knew exactly why, but everyone understood something had changed. The energy that had once filled his home recordings had faded. And so, the fate of Elvis's final album would be decided far from the studio, on the stages that still awaited him. His absence from the January sessions made Felton Jarvis and RCA look for an alternative. The crowds were still filling the venues, and the tours were producing memorable performances. That's when the solution came naturally: use live recordings to fill the gaps. The 1977 performances, captured in multi-track during the spring tour, contained some of his most intense moments. Even with his health declining, Elvis still had a commanding presence, and his voice, though deeper and more weary, retained a power that moved anyone who saw him sing. The April 1977 tour became one of the most symbolic of his career. It was clear that his body was struggling, but his artistic spirit remained intact. Amid the arena lights and the devotion of fans, Elvis could still draw applause that seemed to last forever. It was in this setting that some of the most emotional recordings of Moody Blue were born. On April 24, 1977, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Elvis stepped onto the stage at the Chrysler Arena. The show was recorded in multitrack, which would later allow studio-quality sound. Among the songs performed that night, two became permanent parts of his discography: Unchained Melody and Little Darlin'. The first remains one of the most touching moments of his career. Elvis sat at the piano, accompanied only by his band and an audience in complete silence. His voice, both powerful and fragile, filled the arena with emotion that no microphone could fully capture. It was as if every note were a hidden goodbye disguised as a performance. Little Darlin', recorded the same night, showed the opposite side: light, playful, almost humorous. Elvis laughed, improvised, played with the band and the crowd. This contrast between the emotional weight of a ballad and the spontaneous joy of rock and roll showed that even near the end, he still possessed a charisma no other artist could match. 2 days later, at another stop on the tour in Michigan, another recording was chosen. If You Love Me, Let Me Know featured Elvis interacting with the audience, delivering vocals with the same passion as always. These live recordings complemented the studio tracks from the Jungle Room and became essential to completing the final album. Including live performances on an official studio album wasn't common for an artist of Elvis's stature, but at that moment, it made sense. The live recordings represented what he still had most authentically: his direct connection with the audience. There were no second takes, no overdubs, no filters. It was Elvis in his purest form, singing for the fans who had been with him since the days of Heartbreak Hotel. Behind the scenes, Felton Jarvis faced the challenge of uniting two very different sound worlds. On one side, the muffled intimacy of the Jungle Room sessions. On the other, the raw energy of packed arenas. The mixing and mastering process required sensitivity to balance these contrasts without losing the album's soul. The final result was a hybrid record that sounded like both a confession and a celebration. For fans, listening to those live tracks is like stepping into a historical moment. There's a sincerity that transcends any technical limitations. You can hear his breathing between phrases, the physical effort in each note, the total commitment, even when his voice wavered slightly. In Unchained Melody, for instance, there's a moment when the audience begins to applaud before the song even ends. It's as if everyone there knew they were witnessing something that would never happen again. These recordings prove that, until the very end, Elvis Presley was an artist who lived for the stage. Even when his health faltered, he refused to put down the microphone. For him, singing wasn't an obligation, it was a way of existing. And it was that devotion that gave Moody Blue its soul. The live tracks captured the essence of Elvis the performer, generous, intense, humorous, and full of emotion. Do you agree that the 1977 shows reveal the most human and emotional Elvis of his entire journey? Write your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion means a lot to this community of true fans. Listening to those performances today, it's impossible not to feel a lump in your throat. They sound like the artist's final embrace with the audience that had followed him for decades. In that April of 1977, Elvis Presley wasn't just ending a tour. He was recording, without realizing it, the final notes of a life dedicated entirely to music. And once again, the stage was the place where he found immortality. In July 1977, the world received what would be Elvis Presley's last album released in his lifetime, Moody Blue. The record hit stores surrounded by curiosity and expectation. Fans knew the recordings had been made in an unusual way, partly inside Elvis's home, partly during live shows, and there was a sense of mystery in the air. No one imagined that just a few weeks later, that album would become a symbol of farewell. The official release took place on July 19, 1977. To mark the occasion, RCA made a historic decision to release the album on translucent blue vinyl. It was a marketing move, but also a symbolic tribute, since the title, Moody Blue, evoked a color that had always been part of the King of Rock's image. That detail instantly made the record a collector's item. Within days, store shelves were empty, and fans were competing for copies all over the world. The album featured 10 tracks that reflected a multifaceted Elvis. There was the romanticism of the ballads, the power of the live performances, and the melancholy of an artist who, unknowingly, was recording his last work. Unchained Melody and Little Darling, recorded on Michigan stages, captured the warmth of his live shows and his bond with the audience. The Jungle Room tracks, such as Way Down and He'll Have to Go, brought the intimate, introspective sound of his final home sessions. It was as if two versions of Elvis coexisted within the same record: the public man, idolized, and the private man, silent, surrounded by a few friends and his own memories. The single, Moody Blue, released months earlier, had already topped the country charts. Its light, almost pop sound contrasted with the emotional depth of other songs. The track felt like a breath of air amid the album's seriousness. But it was Way Down, released in June 1977, that would gain even greater significance. The upbeat, energetic song reached #1 on the UK charts shortly after the artist's passing. It was as if the grieving audience had chosen that song to celebrate the memory of their idol. Moody Blue isn't just a collection of songs. It's a faithful portrait of the moment Elvis was living. The home recordings reveal an introspective artist still chasing perfection, even when his strength was fading. The live tracks show the performer who never lost touch with his fans, the man who transformed every stage into his kingdom. Each song, each line sung, carries a sense of urgency, as if time were running out and he knew it. When the record hit the market, critics were divided. Some said the album sounded uneven, with differences in quality between the studio and live tracks. Others argued that it was precisely that mix that made it authentic. Over time, the latter view prevailed. Moody Blue came to be understood as an emotional document, the final testimony of an artist who gave everything until the end. In August 1977, just 4 weeks after the album's release, the world received the news that would shake music forever. From that moment on, Moody Blue ceased to be just Elvis Presley's new record and became a symbol of closure. Sales skyrocketed, and the blue vinyl turned into a sacred relic among fans. What had once been seen as an unusual project came to be heard with almost religious reverence. Every track began to sound like a goodbye. RCA, aware of the impact, quickly increased production. Copies sold out in days. Radio stations played Way Down and Moody Blue non-stop. In the following weeks, millions of people listened to Elvis again, but with a different kind of emotion. It was no longer just the voice of a superstar, but the voice of someone who had left behind an immortal legacy. Over time, the album solidified as one of the most important in the King's discography. It doesn't shine for technical perfection or lavish production, but for its honesty. It's an album of contrasts, where the luxury of fame meets the simplicity of a living room in Graceland. It's the fusion of the artist's grandeur and the man's fragility. It is, in essence, Elvis's final letter to the world. Decades later, every time that blue vinyl spins on a turntable, it still carries something indescribable. There's a presence, an energy that seems to remain alive. Moody Blue is more than an album. It's a testament to Elvis's passion for music, his humanity, and his unbreakable bond with his fans. The sound born within the walls of the Jungle Room and echoed across the stages of 1977 remains the final echo of an artist who never fell silent. The world lost the man, but the King continues to speak through every